Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're watching and listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. In the first segment, you heard our guest, Tony Sayers, talk about his voyage of discovery and the milestones along the way, the various epiphanies he came to during this process of understanding and greater awareness, and the great work he's done helping people pull these etheric and energetic implants out of individuals and helping them to heal and reintegrate. So without any further ado, Tony Sayers, welcome back to the Cosmic Switchboard Show.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me back.
Well, we talked about a variety of issues, both before our interview today and also in the break. And you raised some critical issues in the break, topics you'd like to discuss. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, well, I think we were just going to get into targeted individuals and just talking about, why they're targeted. I think firstly is a good place to start. I think there's certain people that come into this world, whether they've, I guess you've heard the concept of human and non-human souls, or souls that are coming here to obviously help out. And what I found through my work is often, for some reason, my work attracts a lot of these targeted individuals or people that have been through SRA abuse, is that they've got specific gifts or qualities. It might be psychic abilities. Some of them are just so empathic or open-hearted. Others really intuitive, but there's always some kind of reason why they are targeted. And it can go on multiple levels, and it can go on with different entities. Some people are more targeted by perhaps aliens, and others might be more targeted with demonic energy and so on and so forth. So it really is an interesting area of research as to why these people are targeted. But again, like I said in the first segment, there'll be many people that probably watch this and think, well, yeah, a lot of this has happened to me. And we're talking about, voice interference, mind looping, all that kind of stuff, things where they feel like they're being watched all the time. It's because that there's something about them that is this matrix, this control system doesn't want to express, and are obviously going to try and hold back and, try and mess around. So if that is you, then it's important to note that there's something that really they want to try and shut down, as we spoke to about earlier with Max. That they're doing it through fear, and so where I come in, I guess, is to remove a lot of this etheric and AI tech, as I said, the psychotronic weapons that are infused in the etheric within our biological makeup, which tends to, clear a lot of the energetic pathways for people. It doesn't, obviously it doesn't solve all their problems. They still have issues, that where the subconscious work is needed, but it just sort of clears the pathways and enables them some kind of energetic freedom, particularly as well with the SRA survivors as well. I've found that during working with them, if I go into some of the ritualistic stuff in terms of the actual traumas, there can be so much clearing that can be done, where the person can really feel, because it's almost like these people have had a very difficult set of circumstances laid out for them before they're even birthed, because the matrix knows what kind of soul's coming into the body, and they'll try and hijack the person's life. Maybe they'll be born into a dysfunctional family where they'll be abused or whatever, and then they'll turn to drugs or alcohol. Then that will put them off their path. Some end up suiciding. And so there's always these series of events and traumas. But I've also found if the person outlines the traumas, and I can go into the traumas and remove stuff that came in on the traumas, it also frees them up, energetically speaking, as well. So yeah, there are a lot of targeted individuals out there right now. I think there is a wave of souls that are coming down here, which are they just get it, like they're born, quote unquote, awake. These people are a threat, and whatever you're going through, if you do feel like you're targeted, and we're all targeted to different degrees, I've worked with people that have been through hell and back and have still made it through the other side. It's not easy, but we've seen some really good results.
Yes, I've met people who've gone through horrific SRA, cult, and mind control abuse. And the fact that they can still not only hold it together, but be productive members of society, still be able to raise awareness, encourage, and uplift others. Again, like you pointed out in the first segment, Tony, it's a testament to the human spirit, the indomitable nature of our spirit that despite, in no way would I categorize myself compared to what others have gone through, the amount of trauma they've experienced, but collectively, what we can endure and what we can overcome, that speaks volumes of who we are and why they go to such extremes to dumb us down and sicken us, like you pointed out earlier also. Now, when you work with the people that have come out of the SRA background, what are the telltale signs, upon first meeting them, aside from them telling you that they've had these experiences? What are the other commonalities aside from the normal ones, like the familial, generational aspect to it? You alluded to their soul quality and aspects of their astral soul matrix that makes them unique and a potential threat. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, most people obviously they outline that from the beginning, so I already have that awareness. But sometimes I work with people, and generally, something that I've noticed, which seems to be quite typical, is that they won't remember much of their childhood. There'll be a large chunk that they just don't remember. They don't have any memories. And obviously, as we know, a child's mind can fracture and, creates protectors and barriers so the child forgets the whatever happened to them. So if there's like a missing period, and I don't want to freak people out because a lot of people can't remember a lot of their childhood, but that tends to be something that then I will delve a little bit further in and probe a little bit more. But in terms of the actual blueprint, every time I work with an SRA victim, you can tell why they've been targeted. I'm working with one lady at the moment over in Canada, and we've been doing some inner child work with her as well, and she is just so strong. She's so solid. If you met her, she's light, bubbly. You just wouldn't. And like the things that she's been through, she was as a kid, she would be one of the ones that would try and protect the others. So we've had to do a lot of work around that. There's a lot of guilt around that because obviously a lot of friends were murdered and tortured and all that kind of stuff. But you just see like an unbelievable strength because they target the strong ones. They target they know about that child's gifts from a very early age. And, time after time after time, kept down in basements and the worst kind of stuff that they try to stamp out the spirit, trying to break the spirit. And this woman she's just like unbelievable. And that's quite common with, you look at who you have over in Australia, Fiona Barnett, same, what a powerful woman she is, it's like unbelievable. And you can see why they would have messed with these people. So quite often when I'm working with the SRA victims, I'm dealing with a very, very strong, often very intuitive, insightful, intelligent person. And they're all the qualities that they want to try and stamp out of the person. So it's actually a real honor and a privilege to work with people like that because, they've got so much courage and, to even face that kind of horror. And then not only to face it, a lot of them will do generational work and clearing for the other members and doing a lot of like stuff multidimensionally to, kind of transmute a lot of this satanic energy, and so they're really insightful and intriguing people to work with, and obviously very brave and courageous. And like I say, I feel very honoured and privileged to be able to work with them. And the same goes for the targeted individuals as well. But the targeted individuals, I often feel like maybe more like a non-human soul. Maybe this is their first time around, and so they have these innate abilities, innate qualities, but they haven't been gone through quite as bad as the SRA victims, obviously. But it's just really interesting to see how, you'll have the reptilians will target certain people, the greys will target certain people, and then you'll have, cyborg energy, then you'll have overlords, and, all these different kind of people are targeted in all kinds of different ways for whatever reasons. But always it's because the person is, we're all gifted, but maybe let's say more in tune with their gifts because this is their first time around.
Have any of these SRA survivors and targeted individuals, have they described how they perceive this archontic demiurge Wetico type force in their etheric third eye vision? Have they ever told you what it seems to them to appear as? Like I was working for a while with a very gifted psychic, and she described sprouting out of the galactic core of every galaxy that she was plugging into, particularly our own, these tendrils that were just coming out of the galactic core and spreading in every direction. And that essentially was the demiurge force that the Gnostics talk about, and how it just contaminated and stained everything it touched. And some places had more of a resistance to others. Some planets, some systems had more of a resistance to this force than others not so much of a resistance. Have they described to you what this force appears to be, besides not necessarily talking about if it takes on like a humanoid shape or takes on like an appearance of some kind of dark demonic figure? Is there something beyond that they've seen?
These entities take all kinds of forms, as you know. You have the reptilian, you have like the shadow beings, the men in black kind of figures. So it's never kind of just one thing, so to speak. But it's more of it's more of a feeling for them. They come to me because they feel like they're dragging along a car with them. I've had them describe it like that energetically. And this, this kind of rope with a car attached to it, they've been dragging it around for their whole life, and they just feel really heavy energetically, obviously, and they can connect the dots. So it's alleviating that energetic heaviness, which is, through all the rituals and stuff like that. It's sometimes obviously we go back into that, and you wouldn't even believe that some of the stuff that they've been witness to or privy to. It's absolutely disgusting, and obviously when all that's going on, there's a whole crowd of different entities and demonic forces that are working, and which attach themselves obviously through the abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, the torture that they go through. Whenever the child's in trauma or completely out of the center, they're coming in and hijacking, and so it's a really deep process, which is sometimes visual to them, but more like they're just absolutely feeling completely hijacked with their own energy. But actually, an interesting thing that came out of a session the other day, the same lady that I was working with, we went back into like a meditative, like a guided meditative state, and she actually saw like these cords coming from her heart that went all the way into Saturn, and from her one in her pineal, one in her heart, one in her stomach. So we went through the process of removing those, and she noticed a shift, and that got me thinking. I thought, I got the message clearly. I was like, I need to do like a guided meditation and put it on YouTube to you know, help others do that. So that's actually on my channel, where, you know, I've done this guided meditation, and I think we're corded into that planet, which is obviously Saturn, Satan. It's the ruling planet. So there's cords and plugs and all that kind of stuff all over, and everyone has stuff differently. Like for some people, there'll be a lot of interference around the heart. You know, you meet them, you can tell they're extremely loving, you can feel their energy, and, you know, there'll be a lot of implants and stuff going on around that. For other people, maybe the neocortex of the brain, you know, which is linked to higher thought forms and downloads and stuff, that will be completely hijacked, and it's clearing that. So what I do is I go into the areas of the body as well, rather than just the generic person and the human body, because they target different areas of the body to try and hijack them, as you mentioned earlier.
Well, what you mentioned also about Saturn is key, and David Icke has talked a lot about this, the Saturn Moon Matrix. And I think about that book, The Ringmakers of Mars, rather the Ringmakers of Saturn, and, you know, the effort that some of these ETs have gone to. It's probably not too difficult for them, you know, but they make these gigantic rings to modulate and emit certain frequencies, reflect it off the moon, and whammo, here we are. And then we look around, and the judges are wearing Saturnian black, and so much is a reflection of that Saturnalia, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Where they've managed to impose this artificial reality, hijack our own. And this is what we've grown up with. And you made a very key point in the first segment, where we are pretty much the last generation to understand freedom, real freedom, to a degree. You know, aside from the whole monetary, you know, debt, enslavement, and all that stuff. But, you know, the kids today and what they're being subjected to, because when we talk about a mystery Babylon, when we talk about Saturnalia, we notice what they do with the kids, and especially Hollywood is such a big part of this. The music industry is such a big part of this. When we see what the kids are being hammered with constantly, with Beyonce and all this Luciferian stuff, it's the reason I bring it up is, in any of your work with some of these SRA survivors, did they talk about past lives when they're involved in dark rituals, or been victimized in dark rituals in ancient Egypt and ancient Near East, in the Mayan civilization, whatever the case may be?
Some of them do, yeah. Some of them, I wouldn't say all of them do, but some of them definitely it's come up before, that, you know, it might have been something that had happened before. So yeah, when you're working with generational stuff, it's trying to, because everything leaves like a holographic imprint, and this is what, you know, holographic kinetics Steve Richards talks about. And you know, if you can transmute that holographic imprint in someone's subconscious mind, you can then, you know, transform it totally. And the same goes for like passing back ancestral burdens down the family line and things like that. So there's a huge amount that we can do with that subconscious intervention, and, you know, and that kind of work. So it's really fascinating, really, to be privy to a person's mind like that, and what they've been through. And, you know, I always say, like, my own learning and my own discoveries have come directly working with other people, and what they've gone through. And I've found more stuff working through other people, especially through targeted individuals, than anything else. So you know, they've helped me with my work. And yeah, as we go forward with it, I'm finding more layers, and, you know, getting through more techie stuff, and then it just becomes it becomes you kind of know what to look for. So you end up researching algorithms that are in a computer, and then you see, oh, there's a divide and rule algorithm, there's a matrix algorithm, oh, there's a greedy algorithm. And so then you correlate that to the energy work, and, you know, people are feeling stuff come out their heads and things like that. So it's almost like being a computer hacker, basically. And you know, viruses interfaces, you know, neural networks, all the stuff that Elon Musk is talking about now with neuro implants, and you know, all this stuff that they want to hook us up into the cloud with, is already there in 4D. So what my work is really is removing and kind of hunting down all this stuff that's already manifest here in our computers, and the likes of what Elon Musk is talking about, and then correlating that to the fourth dimension, and you know, removing it from that dimension. And yeah, it's going really well.
That's a key point also, because an argument could be made that, I'm not saying all, but a lot of the technology that we have around us and take for granted, and never mind all the deep black technology secreted in, you know, in these underground installations and in these secure surface installations, that the genesis, the motivation and the inspiration behind that is this archontic / AI demiurgic force. And at some level, because we're here in this 3D, rapidly 4D system, we become, I don't know if infected is strong, you know, is too strong of a word, but some of the people I've talked to that have the etheric third eye vision, they talk about how they've seen these spider bot thingies just pop out of their computer screen and then try to get into them, or they talk about these octopus looking thingies,
Yeah.
etheric octopus thingies that you know have this habit of attaching themselves to people's bodies and energy fields, and how some of them seem to be in sync and work with this Internet of Things as it's been described.
Yeah. Yeah, etheric worms, etheric spiders, dark webs. I've discovered dark webs. I mean, we have the dark, again, as above, so below. We have the dark web here. I've seen dark webs on people.
And just to interrupt for a second, it may explain the almost archetypal fear that people have of spiders too. You know, where you know, at some level, they know that there's these weird spider bots out there.
Yeah, and serpent energy. You know, people don't really like snakes too much either, do they? So this is the fascinating thing with it. I mean, there's so many different types of these things. I mean, I've had like weird orc looking things, and yeah, vampiric looking stuff, and there's just like a smorgasbord of different stuff out there that seems to want to siphon off our energy. And yeah, it's we're batteries to them. And again, you know, you flip it, it just shows how much how powerful we are. If we can just get a handle on some of this and you know, retain some of our power, then we'll be good to go.
And you alluded also to what Ike talks about, the mind-body computer interface, and how it's essentially been hijacked by these archontic forces working through all their hybrid minions here and all this AI NSA style tech. What we're seeing also is, and it speaks to what you just talked about, our immense power, or the totality of our multidimensional state. These black magicians and their associated tech, they know this about us. So when the SRA survivors describe being traumatized and manipulated at so many different levels, not just at the physical level, but at a supernatural, spiritual, energetic level also. And then when you work with some of them, and it turns out that similar things happened to them in ancient Egypt, or because of some binding trap of agreement, maybe, you know, they were a black magician or a dark priestess back in the day. And somehow through this trap of agreement, the roles were reversed, and they wind up being on the receiving end of things. But they still have this innate, latent metaphysical capability, and that seems to me what they want to stamp out. And if they can't entirely subvert it and use it for their own ends, they at least want to just nullify it within us, so we are no longer a threat to them. And I think if more people begin to work at that level, Tony, because we talked about the pitfalls of just lowering one's head and bashing it against these monolithic edifices here of control on the surface. If we begin to work more on the inner planes, we begin to work more energetically and metaphysically, I think that's one of the keys to get out of this mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always been like, I want to get to the root. I want to get to the root of, you know, like what's the root cause of it all? And I really feel like, you know, this metaphysical AI, Saturnia, you know, whatever control grid. I feel like this is, you know, this is a big part of where it's really at. I think it might even go beyond that in terms of, this is my own theory, by the way. It's obviously I can't prove it, but I feel like in this reality you have all these kind of like fake gods, so to speak, that everyone's praying to. You know, pray. What does pray mean? You're food for someone. So you have these gods, and then you have all the outer entities like reptilians that I think are just as enslaved as we are. Reptilians, draconians, you know, vampiric, all this stuff, and then maybe the demiurge behind. But then I think beyond that, I feel like there's some big kind of cyborg behind everything. That, you know, everyone's kind of plugged into somehow. That's, you know, it just seems that there's got to be, and this reality has been overlaid by this, you know, AI construct, and that's why we can still, you know, that essence that I refer to it as essence, the real light, or whatever you want to refer to it, that whisper. It's like a whisper to us, isn't it? It's like a little blowing in the wind, and it's very subtle. So it's still there, but it's all been overlaid by all this crap and these fake religions and all this stuff. So tuning into that, and that frequency is hard work, especially when many of us have forgotten how to think completely. We've got no cognitive functioning, that other people are thinking for us, and, you know, we're not connected to the belly, brain, and the heart and the head, the three, and so we just live, as you mentioned earlier, living from the reptilian brain, which is fight or flight. So we're not tuning into that essence, that whisper that's always present, omnipresent, but it's so quiet that we can't hear it when we're not tuned into it. So I think we have to, you know, understand that the noise is part of this AI construct, and tune into that inner voice, as I refer to it as.
You look at it from the perspective of electronic warfare environment, where all this chaff is thrown into the air, all these electromagnetic signals and frequency jamming is going on. To use a computer term, the original uncorrupted source code, which you refer to, it's there, it's ever present. But with the whole Saturn moon matrix and all the other overlays on top of that, because they make a habit of making us disembodied, Tony, that's another problem. They make us so shame-based from birth. And you add on top of that all the trauma we bring from past lives and the trauma we incur in this current life. And a lot of us don't even like being in our own skin because we're so shame-based. So this results in a lot of people getting into their headspace, disembodied, which is a happy hunting ground for all these entities. And Jerry Martinsky and Sherry Sweeney talk about that. All these intrusive thoughts and voices, those are really entities. And he talked about how Emanuel Swedenborg talked about how it's questionable just how many of these thoughts are really our own. Where do they really originate from, right? And then you have the psychiatric tyranny on top of that saying, oh, that's all nonsense. It's all just, you know, chemical reactions in the brain and imbalances of the body chemistry, et cetera, et cetera. So our work is cut out to make us receptive, because we are transceivers, and DNA, as you know, is a transceiver, a sender and receiver information. We can plug into that original uncorrupted source code. We just have to do all the inner work necessary to get to that point. And then when we do start, and some of us get glimpses of it, some of it plug into it at some level, not completely. I think that's what we're striving to do. And that's where these epiphanies come in. That's where these realizations come in. That's part of that internal navigation system that kind of steers us away from things that we don't really need to be involved with.
Absolutely, yeah, and again, it ties in with keeping your own vessel clean as well. You know, this is a conduit for consciousness, and when we corrupt the files with, you know, alcohol, drugs, weed, whatever, then the frequency we're tapping in to can be hijacked and, you know, used against us, and, you know, it can open us up to different, you know, entities and such forth. So I honestly think that that's also a huge part of it, is to keep our own vessel clean, and making sure that we have that clear connection to the omnipresent source code, basically, if you're looking at it as a computer. But the good thing is that it is there. You know, it's always there. That energy is always there. It's just tapping into it, and you know, doing the things that are required so we have that a close relationship with it at all times.
You spoke about the act of prayer and praying, and the synonym of being preyed upon and being prey. Once again, the outward projection to this monotheistic, all-knowing, all-wise, yet paradoxically unseen God, which really is made up of all these unseen entities, and the trap that religion has played for so long, right? And it's remarkable to me, Tony, and I'd like your thoughts about this, because I've spoken to others about this, just the staying power that, for example, Catholicism has, and these other Abrahamic, essentially, you know, archontic religions. How here we are in a new decade, 2020, and still, despite all the never-ending scandals of the Catholic Church, to cite but one example, it still has this energetic hold on the minds, bodies, and souls of so many people.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, really. You know, when you look at the Bible, I think it's been changed 92 times or something by man, and, you know, even the whole Noah's Ark story. I mean, God, this guy got two pairs of every animal on the planet, and people believe it and take it literally. It's kind of embarrassing, but yeah, it's corrupted spirituality. But even that word spirituality is like, I've got a real problem with that word now, because the spirituality that's out there at the moment is completely fake and pseudo new age stuff, and leading people down other cul-de-sacs and honeypots, and I don't know what the correct word would be in place of that, but you know, it's really crazy. But one thing that I do find interesting, though, and I think you've had Jerry Mrazinski on your show, he's been on my show, that he mentioned that these entities actually hate it when you read the Lord's Prayer. You know, they actually hate, like, when you read passages of the Bible. And I was trying to get my head around this, because I really, you know, I don't agree with religion at all. And I was thinking, why do these entities get freaked out when you start talking about Jesus? And then I thought, well, maybe it's just the frequency of the intent of the passage. Maybe it's not anything to do with the Bible itself. Maybe if you just read your own version, which wasn't biblical, maybe they'd still get freaked out by it. But I found that really interesting. So, but yeah, of course, religion's got a lot to answer for as to why we're in this mess. But I just wonder, and maybe, well, I wouldn't mind hearing your view of why you think that they get so freaked out with passages out of the Bible.
It may upset people. You know, it's developing. It's not, these feelings and impressions that I'm getting about the subject are not set in stone. I mean, a lot of things that I took for granted before, I realized they were complete nonsense, a complete inversion of what I now know to be the truth, right? Because I have a personal story about that too, because one time I was abducted. I'm guessing that they were aliens, and I was laid out on this table, and I was surrounded by these dark, shadowy entities. And suddenly, through chattering teeth, I was stammering. I was so scared. I began reciting the 39th Psalm, i.e. the Lord's Prayer. Now, if someone held a gun to my head right now and say, James, recite the 39th Psalm, I wouldn't know it. Oh, yea, through the valley of the shadow of the death. And, you know, I botch all the words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somehow, at that point, maybe like it's an archetypal thing or something, that I just started blurting it out, repeating it over and over through chattering, stammering teeth. And before long, I was returned back to my little tiny studio I lived in at the time. And I still thought I was there. I still thought I was on that table, right? But I suddenly realized after reciting the psalm over and over again through chattering teeth that, literally this kind of fog kind of dissipated. And I realized that I'm back in my tiny little studio. But I know what happened. Now, here's my thoughts about it, which it's a good thing it's a member section because it probably might piss off some of my Christian friends. And I must say that a lot of my Christian friends I hold in with the highest esteem. I respect them, especially the ones that have a spiritual warfare. There's that word again, and you're right. We got to find another way to describe these things, some other terminology that's apt. But I found that there is a subpopulation within the Christian religion that are true spiritual warriors. Most of the rest has been hijacked by Christian Zionism and everything else, right? But there is a core element that realizes, powers and principalities, this is spiritual warfare we're involved in. And they have their take on it. And I found in my dealings with them that a lot of them are straight shooters, whereas a lot of these people in the truth movement or New Agers, anything but straight shooters, a lot of these people, complete frauds, many of them, backstabbers. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point as a disclaimer to let the viewers know that, I love and appreciate spiritual warriors of all stripes, especially Christians. But here's my take, and it's developing, it's not set in stone. What if, Tony, what if we know that in the pantheon of ancient gods, so many of these gods and goddesses were names peculiar to a particular era and culture that were describing the same Anunnaki pantheon, Zeus, Nimrod, whatever the case may be. It was this ruling elite reptile feuding family that, delighted in, warring against one another and destroying planets and the whole bit, right? What if in the hierarchical spiritual scheme of things and in the entity scheme of things, the hierarchical perspective, what if Jesus, Yeshua, is another name for one of these all-powerful Anunnaki? And what if we invoke this name, like I did when I was, laying on a table just through chattering teeth? What if, unbeknownst to me, I'm telling those critters around me, oh, you know what? I'm going to call down one of these friggin' Anunnaki to kick your ass, right?
Yeah.
Now, someone mentioned this to me, and I thought about it, It's like, well, Yeshua, if we take him as a real historical figure, and we know just in our surface level world, everything we've been told about Winston Churchill, just as an example, is complete nonsense. He was an evil person, right? And how distorted his image and how packaged his image has been over time. So if we keep that point in mind, and then we look at Yeshua / Jesus, walked on water, healed the sick, water and wine, etc., etc. What if he was this Anunnaki? But I wouldn't want to say kind of a rebellious Anunnaki. Let's just say that maybe he didn't see eye to eye with the other Anunnaki the way they never see eye to eye with one another. And another paradox about that, Tony, is the tribalist collectivist Talmudic types, they hate the name of Jesus too.
Yeah.
Which is another, they say in their Sanhedrins, in their Talmudic, which is their real Bible, right? Not the Torah, but the Talmud. They say that Jesus is spending eternity boiling in excrement and semen. I mean, that's just like degrading as it can get, right?
Yeah.
So
does it represent Christ consciousness within us?
It's perhaps the ideal. Perhaps the ideal is what they're so against.
Yeah. Any depiction of a an awakening within a person, because that's the way I personally depict Jesus or Christ consciousness. That's the connection, the belly brain, the heart, the pineal gland, and that higher thought form, that higher, you know, the higher thought thinking person, that doesn't bow to authority, that doesn't so when you say that out loud, it's almost like you're connecting with that frequency, that Christ consciousness within, and maybe it's that freaks them out so much. But I find it fascinating. I really do. And you know, Catholic priests doing all these you know, rituals to clear out demons and stuff, and reciting from religious doctrines and things like that. So I'm curious and open-minded to what that was. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if the end result, if let's say Catholic priest A managed to exorcise and banish demons out of like a young child or some, you know, poor possessed woman somewhere, I can't help but applaud that. I mean, I don't know what that means down the track, what's to become of that person thus afflicted, if they're going to be free in this incarnation of that particular torment going forward. It doesn't mean that some other entities may not come along sometime down the track and try to influence them in some way. But because a lot of these people, I'm not going to say that all Catholic priests are pedos, because that would be an absolutist, simplistic generalization, and that's not the case. But if there are some out there that are doing good works, they just happen to be brought up in the Catholic faith, like so many people were. I'm a recovering Catholic myself. My parents started dragging me to Catholic church when I was a boy, but I made such a nuisance of myself that they stopped doing it. I embarrassed the hell out of them, basically. Oh, please.
Interesting as well. I was watching something yesterday about how demonic possession is at an all-time high. The priests are doing more clearing now than ever before, and I think that's also symbolic of the times that we're living in. These maybe the veil's getting thinner between this dimension and that dimension. And they're really kind of going after people in a way that maybe they haven't done in previous times. So I thought that was quite interesting when I heard that as well. I think it was in Italy. It's like the amount of exorcisms is up like really huge amount, like 60% or something. So that also is symbolic of a spiritual war going on in dimensions just outside of this one. So it's a real crazy place to be.
That's a very good point, because you hear these New Age la-di-das. Yes, we're going to ascend, go to the fifth dimension, and the fifth dimension is a never-ending champagne cruise, Tony. We're just going to be just playing our harp, sitting on clouds, and never-ending eternal bliss. And from what I understand, with talking to people and my own personal experiences, but especially talking to people that have the etheric third eye vision that can see in other dimensions, they say, oh, the fifth, sixth dimension, it's nothing but spiritual warfare. So when these people talk about, oh, let's ascend to the fifth, it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot more to it than that. And also, you made the point, it's a key point to make. The rise in exorcisms because of more and more people are being spiritually afflicted, let's say. And also how that's in sync with the psychiatric tyranny, where they go out of their way to say, oh, this is just chemical imbalance. Jerry Marzinski talks about this all the time. It's got nothing to do with spirits or intrusive thoughts or entities, which we know that's exactly what's happening. And what we're seeing is, it seems to me, Tony, and I'm not putting a negative spin on this. I'm one of those glass half full types, right? That the way things are set up, the things we ingest, the food we eat, the things we imbibe in, the air we breathe, and now the 5G rollout, all of it seems conducive to me to open us up, and open up not only the fabric of what we call space-time, but open us up individually to more and more of this entity predation, if you will. I had Supal Vedic on the show. She'd be a great guest on your show. She's brilliant. And she talked about how, with her etheric third eye vision, because what she does is she goes to houses and clears them of unwanted entities and spirits and whatnot, and helps the families that are similarly afflicted. she can see with her etheric third eye vision, not only, like around mortuaries and around funeral parlors, all these dark, shadowy type of entities, but she can see around these communications towers, these cell phone towers, see all kinds of dark energy swirling around, even entities swirling around. And recently, she went public on a post on Facebook. She had to get an MRI, and when she was in the sarcophagus, she even saw an entity that was like curious about her, curious why she could see it, right? So the point I'm making is all of these things combined, all the frequencies, everything else, it seems to be opening up even more doorways into our reality.
Well, that's what they want, don't they? They want they want a distorted energy field, because our frequency, I guess, is also on the rise, hopefully anyway. But they're trying to lock it down, and with all the 5G and the radiation everywhere and all this radioactive soup, it kind of anchors it back down into their dimension, and I think they're able to interface a lot easier, because I think one of the problems they were having is that, especially when it comes to the reptilians, is that the dimensions were getting so thin, they were having problems, shape shifting and stuff like that. And I think it's all being done. I mean, there's multiple reasons, as always, for all the things that they do. But I think part of it is to keep the whole density low vibration, and so they can interface much easier and affect things a lot easier as well.
Absolutely. What they've tried to do over time in the UFO field is discredit all these contactees from the 40s, 50s, and 60s who reported sometimes ongoing contacts with beings that they don't look like us humans. We look like them. These are quite advanced human beings, and these were not abductions. They interacted with people, took them for joyrides, if you will, and then gave them guided tours of their craft sometimes. And mainstream ufology still discredits the so-called contactee movement, but I would say that there's a lot more there than meets the eye, and that whole era, the whole contactee syndrome, needs to be reevaluated by any serious truth seeker. But anyway, what some of these ETs have told the people back in the day, and nowadays we have different terms. Like some of those ETs that are human looking, we would have called them Nordics or blondes or Palladian looking today. And they just had different names for them back then. But anyway, what they said was that incessant and frequent atmospheric and underground nuclear testing was not only causing problems in our world, obviously, it was causing problems on their worlds. And they said, we're not even in your dimension. Okay, it's causing these cracks and these fissures, if you will, to manifest. There's supposed to be, to some degree, a separation. I mean, for those who have the kind of yogic ability to, transcend dimensions and everything, that takes a lot of discipline. And even in the autobiography of a yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda talked about all these evil yogis doing all these evil things. So there's a reason for the discipline and the impulse control that goes along with having these kinds of powers, Tony. So when you do go transcend dimensions, you do it in such a way that's not disruptive and what have you. And setting off all these nuclear bombs was creating all these holes and all these fissures in different dimensions leading into ours. And so getting back to that thought you made, that point you made about all the radiation and stuff, which seems to, be beneficial to a lot of these beings, particularly reptilians. But when you combine that with all the leaky nuclear power plants all over the world, Fukushima and all the rest of it, and now you add on the 5G, definitely it seems to me to be a form of terraforming, where all these entities are coming in, taking people over, and we see this Wedico virus, as has been described by the Native Americans, this Wedico issue, manifests in so many different ways, where people just sit and they just spew out all these matrix kind of one-liners over and over and over. And when those of us that, have to interact with people on a daily basis, we just have to have our armor up and just, deflect all that stuff and, seem to agree and seem to go along with that consensus, but not take it on board. And so we've run out of time in this interview, but thank you so much, Tony. And we'd love to have you back, because we're just scratching the surface of what you know and all the different topics we can cover. And I want to thank you personally for the outstanding work you've done and continue to do.
Thanks, James, and thank you for doing what you're doing and giving me a platform and giving other people. I really appreciate it.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. And to our dear listeners out there, wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing, have a very pleasant time, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.